The cold November wind cut through the streets of Los Angeles like a knife. Most people walking down Sunset Boulevard that evening had their collars pulled up, hands stuffed deep in their pockets, rushing to get somewhere warm. But for Robert, this was just another night. Another cold, lonely night on the streets. Robert sat on the sidewalk outside a busy coffee shop, his back against the brick wall. He'd been homeless for 8 months now, though sometimes it felt like 8 years. The cardboard sign beside him read simply, "Veteran. Anything helps. God bless." But most people didn't even look at it. They walked past like he was invisible, like he was just part of the street furniture. He couldn't blame them, really. Robert knew what he looked like. His jacket was torn at the shoulder, his beard was overgrown and tangled, and his hands were dirty no matter how many times he washed them in public restrooms. He barely recognized himself anymore when he caught his reflection in store windows. It hadn't always been like this. Robert used to have a life. He'd served his country as a Marine, done 2 tours overseas, came home with medals and memories he wished he could forget. For a while, things were okay. He had a job working maintenance at an apartment complex. He had a small place of his own. He even had a family, a daughter who was the light of his life. But then the nightmares started getting worse. The panic attacks came out of nowhere, leaving him shaking and unable to breathe. He lost his job because he couldn't show up consistently. His wife left, taking their daughter with her. The bills piled up, and one day he found himself on the street with nothing but a backpack and the clothes on his back. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of sleeping in doorways, of scrounging for food, of being treated like he didn't exist. 8 months of watching the world go by while he sat still, stuck in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. Tonight was especially cold. Robert's stomach growled. He'd only eaten a half sandwich someone had left on a bench earlier that day. The coffee shop behind him smelled amazing, warm and inviting, but he knew he couldn't go in. Not looking like this, not without money. He counted the change in his pocket for the 3rd time that hour. 73 cents. Not even enough for a small coffee. Maybe if he asked someone, just one more person, he could get enough for something hot to drink, something to warm him up from the inside. The evening crowd was thick now. People leaving work, heading to dinners, meeting friends. Robert watched them all, trying to pick someone who might help. Someone who might actually see him as a human being, not just a problem to step around. That's when he noticed the man walking alone on the sidewalk. He was dressed casually. Nothing fancy. Dark jeans, a black jacket, a simple shirt underneath. He had long dark hair and a beard, and he walked with his head slightly down like he was deep in thought. There was something familiar about him, but Robert couldn't quite place it at first. Then it hit him. That was Keanu Reeves, the actor, the guy from those action movies. Robert had seen him in films back when he used to have a TV, back when he used to have a home. What was someone like that doing walking alone on a Tuesday night without bodyguards or fancy cars? Robert hesitated. Should he ask? Celebrities probably got bothered all the time. They probably had people asking them for things constantly. But then again, Robert was cold and hungry and desperate. What did he have to lose? His pride? He'd lost that months ago. As Keanu got closer, Robert made a decision. He stood up, his legs stiff from sitting on the cold concrete. His heart was pounding. This was harder than people thought, asking strangers for help. Every rejection stung, every disgusted look felt like a punch to the gut. "Excuse me, sir?" Robert's voice came out rougher than he intended, scratchy from the cold. Keanu stopped and turned. He didn't look annoyed or scared like some people did. He just looked at Robert, making eye contact. Actually looking at him. "I'm sorry to bother you," Robert continued, the words tumbling out. I was wondering if you could spare $1. Just $1? I'm trying to get something warm to drink." He braced himself for the usual responses. The quick sorry, no cash, or the faster walk away. Some people would reach for their phones like they were about to call the police. Robert had seen it all, but Keanu didn't do any of those things. Instead, he did something Robert never expected. Something that would change everything. Keanu looked around for a moment, then looked back at Robert with eyes that seemed genuinely kind. Not pitying, not disgusted. Just kind. $1, Keanu said, and there was something in his voice. Not judgment. Not dismissal. Just curiosity. "Yes, sir," Robert replied, his voice shaking slightly. "Just $1. That's all I need." What happened next, Robert would remember for the rest of his life. Keanu didn't reach for his wallet. Not yet. Instead, he took a step closer. Then another. And then, to Robert's complete shock, Keanu lowered himself down and sat on the cold sidewalk right next to him. People walking by started to slow down, doing double takes. Some pulled out their phones. But Keanu didn't seem to notice or care. He just sat there on the concrete, leaning back against the wall like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Before we talk about that dollar," Keanu said, turning to look at Robert, "tell me your name." "I'm Keanu," Robert blinked. His throat felt tight. When was the last time someone had asked his name? When was the last time someone had actually wanted to know who he was, not just wanted him to go away? "Robert," he managed to say. "My name's Robert." "It's good to meet you, Robert," Keanu said, and he meant it. Robert could hear it in his voice. "Now tell me something. What's your story? How did you end up here?" And just like that, sitting on a cold sidewalk on Sunset Boulevard with a famous actor he'd just asked for $1, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt seen. He felt human. He felt like maybe, just maybe, someone actually cared about the answer to that question. Robert sat there on the cold sidewalk, stunned. He'd asked for $1, and instead of walking away, this famous actor had sat down beside him like they were old friends, like Robert was worth talking to. Like his story mattered. "I don't know where to start," Robert said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. He stared at his worn-out shoes, unable to meet Keanu's eyes. Shame washed over him. "How do you explain to someone successful how you ended up on the streets?" "Start wherever feels right," Keanu said gently. There was no rush in his voice, no impatience. He just sat there waiting like he had all the time in the world. So Robert started talking, and once he started, the words just poured out. He told Keanu about the Marines, about serving his country with pride, about the brothers he'd lost overseas, the things he'd seen that still haunted his dreams. He talked about coming home and trying to fit back into normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. Everything seemed too loud or too quiet, too fast or too slow. The nightmares were the worst, Robert said, his voice barely above a whisper. I'd wake up screaming. My wife, she tried to understand at first, but after a while it was too much for her. I don't blame her. I was a mess. Keanu nodded, not interrupting, just listening. Really listening. Robert noticed that about him. He wasn't just waiting for his turn to talk or checking his phone. He was fully present, giving Robert his complete attention. Robert continued. He told him about losing his job because he couldn't handle the stress, couldn't show up consistently when the panic attacks hit. About watching his small savings disappear as the bills piled up, about the divorce and the worst part, losing regular contact with his daughter. She's 15 now, Robert said, his voice cracking. I haven't seen her in almost a year. She probably doesn't even want to see me anymore. Can't blame her. What kind of father ends up like this? A father who's been through hell and is still fighting, Keanu said quietly. That's what kind. Robert looked up, surprised. Keanu's eyes were serious, no trace of pity in them. Just understanding. You served your country, Keanu continued. You saw things most people can't even imagine. You came home carrying weights that no one should have to carry alone. That's not failure, Robert. That's trauma. There's a difference. Something in Robert's chest loosened. He'd been carrying so much shame for so long, feeling like everything was his fault, like he was weak for not being able to handle it better. But the way Keanu said it with such certainty and kindness made something shift inside him. By now, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. People had their phones out, recording. Robert noticed them and felt a spike of anxiety. What if this went viral? What if his daughter saw him like this, begging on the street? Keanu must have noticed his discomfort because he glanced at the crowd, then back at Robert. Ignore them, he said simply. This conversation is between you and me. Nothing else matters right now, and somehow that helped. Robert took a breath and kept talking. He told Keanu about the first night on the streets, how terrifying it was, about learning where it was safe to sleep, where to find food, which areas to avoid, about the other people he'd met living rough, some kind, some dangerous, about the constant cold, the constant hunger, the constant feeling of being less than human. People look through you, Robert said, like you're not even there. Or worse, they look at you like you're trash, like you chose this, like you woke up one day and decided, yeah, I want to live on the street and beg for change. I know, Keanu said, and something in his voice made Robert believe he really did understand. I've known people who've been where you are, People I cared about deeply. There was a pain in Keanu's eyes when he said it, old and deep. Robert wanted to ask, but he didn't. Some pain was too private to share with strangers, even kind ones. They sat in silence for a moment. The traffic rushed by. The coffee shop behind them buzzed with activity. People walked past, some stopping to stare, others pretending not to notice. But in that moment, sitting on the cold concrete, Robert felt something he hadn't felt in months. He felt heard. He felt like a person again. "Can I ask you something?" Keanu said after a while. "Sure," Robert replied. "That dollar you asked for something warm to drink. When was the last time you had a real meal?" Robert had to think about it. "Yesterday, I think. Someone from a church group was handing out sandwiches, but before that, maybe 2 days?" Keanu's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything right away. He just nodded slowly, taking it in. "And where do you sleep?" Keanu asked. "Depends on the night," Robert said. "There's a doorway a few blocks from here that's pretty sheltered. Sometimes the shelter has room, but it fills up fast. You have to get there early, and I'm not always in the right area when they open." "What about your stuff? Do you have somewhere to keep your things?" "Just what's in my backpack," Robert said, gesturing to the worn bag beside him. "Everything I own in the world fits in there now." Funny how that works. You spend your whole life accumulating stuff, and then you realize how little you actually need to survive. "Surviving and living are two different things," Keanu said. "You shouldn't just be surviving, Robert. You should be living." Robert felt his eyes start to burn with tears. He blinked them back. "That ship sailed a long time ago." "No," Keanu said firmly. "It didn't. You're still here. You're still fighting. That counts for something." More people had stopped now. Someone called out, "Keanu, can we get a picture?" But Keanu ignored them completely. He stayed focused on Robert like nothing else mattered. "Tell me something," Keanu said. "If you could have anything right now, not just a dollar, not just a warm drink, but anything, what would it be?" Robert laughed bitterly. "You mean besides a time machine to go back and fix everything?" "I'm serious," Keanu said. "What do you really want?" Robert thought about it. Really thought about it. What did he want? The question was so simple, but the answer was so complicated. He wanted his old life back, but that was impossible. He wanted his daughter back, but he had no way to even contact her. He wanted to stop being invisible, to stop feeling worthless. "I want my daughter to be proud of me again," Robert finally said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to be someone she doesn't have to be ashamed of. I want to be able to take care of myself, to have a job, a place to live. I want to feel like a man again, not just this." He gestured at himself, at his dirty clothes and overgrown beard, at the cardboard sign and the cup with a few coins in it. Keanu was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" Robert asked, suddenly nervous. "Making some calls," Keanu said simply. "Is that okay?" Robert didn't know what to say. He just nodded, confused and hopeful and terrified all at once. Keanu dialed a number and held the phone to his ear. "Hey, it's me," he said when someone answered. "Yeah, I know it's late. Listen, I'm with a veteran who needs help. Proper help. You still have room in that program we talked about?" Robert's heart started pounding. What was happening? Keanu talked for a few minutes, occasionally looking at Robert and nodding. When he hung up, he was already dialing another number. "Who are you calling?" Robert asked, his voice shaking. "People who can help," Keanu said. "If you'll let them. But first, let me ask you something. Are you willing to accept help, Robert? Real help, not just a dollar?" Robert felt tears running down his face now, and he didn't try to stop them. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, I am." Keanu smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Good," he said, "because you're not going to spend another night on the street. Not if I can help it." And just like that, Robert's life started to change. Robert watched in disbelief as Keanu made call after call, right there on the sidewalk. Each conversation seemed purposeful, focused. Keanu wasn't just throwing money at the problem. He was actually trying to help, really help. "Yes, tonight," Keanu said into the phone. "I know it's short notice, but this can't wait." "Thank you. I really appreciate it." He hung up and looked at Robert. "Okay, first things first. There's a transitional housing program for veterans about 20 minutes from here. They're expecting you tonight." Robert's mouth fell open. "Tonight? But I thought those places had waiting lists months long." "They do," Keanu said. but I've been supporting this particular program for a few years now. They keep a couple of emergency beds available for situations like this. It's not fancy, but it's warm, it's safe, and it's yours for as long as you need it while we figure out the next steps." "Next steps?" Robert repeated, still trying to process what was happening. "We'll get to that," Keanu said. "But first, let's get you sorted for tonight." "You hungry?" Robert almost laughed. Hungry didn't begin to cover it. "I could eat," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Keanu stood up and offered Robert his hand. Robert took it, letting Keanu pull him to his feet. His legs were stiff from sitting, and he swayed slightly. Keanu steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here," Keanu said. "Good food, quiet. Let's get you a proper meal." "I can't go in anywhere looking like this," Robert protested, suddenly aware of how he must smell, how dirty his clothes were. "Yes, you can," Keanu said firmly. "You're a human being who deserves to eat at a table like everyone else. Anyone who has a problem with that can talk to me." They walked together through the streets, Keanu matching Robert's slower pace. People stared. Some took pictures. A few called out to Keanu, but he kept walking, keeping himself between Robert and the cameras, like he was trying to shield him. The diner was small and warm, with red vinyl booths and the smell of coffee and bacon. When they walked in, the hostess did a double take, recognizing Keanu. But before she could say anything, Keanu spoke. "Table for 2, please. Somewhere quiet." She led them to a booth in the back. Robert slid in, feeling completely out of place, but also grateful to be sitting somewhere warm. The plastic seat felt like luxury after months of concrete and cardboard. "Order anything you want," Keanu said, handing Robert a menu. "I mean it, anything." Robert's hands shook as he looked at the menu. There was so much food. When was the last time he'd had choices? When was the last time someone had told him to order whatever he wanted? When the waitress came, Robert ordered a burger with fries, soup, and a hot chocolate. His stomach growled just thinking about it. Keanu ordered coffee and a sandwich, but Robert noticed he seemed more interested in making sure Robert was comfortable than in his own meal. While they waited for the food, Keanu pulled out his phone again. "I need to make a few more calls." "Do you mind?" "No, of course not," Robert said. He still couldn't quite believe this was happening, that Keanu Reeves, the movie star, was sitting across from him in a diner making calls to help him. "This is about a job," Keanu said, dialing. "A friend of mine owns a property management company. They're always looking for good maintenance people, especially ones with military experience. The discipline, the attention to detail, it all translates. You interested?" Robert's throat tightened. "I haven't worked in over a year. I don't even have references anymore. Who's going to hire me looking like this?" "Someone who sees potential instead of circumstances," Keanu said. Then someone answered his call. "Tom, hey, it's Keanu. Listen, I need a favor." Robert sat there listening as Keanu basically set up a job interview for him. Just like that. Like it was the easiest thing in the world. He talked about Robert's military background, his maintenance experience, his work ethic. He made Robert sound capable and valuable, not like a homeless man who'd lost everything. When he hung up, Keanu smiled. "You have an interview next Monday. Tom's a good guy. He doesn't care about the gap in your work history. He cares about whether you can do the job and whether you'll show up. Can you do both those things?" "Yes," Robert said immediately. "Absolutely yes." "Then you've got a real shot at this," Keanu said. The food arrived, and Robert had to force himself not to eat too fast. His stomach wasn't used to this much food anymore. But it was the best meal he'd had in months, maybe years. Every bite felt like a gift. As he ate, Keanu talked more. He explained the housing program, how it worked, what Robert could expect. He told him about counseling services available for veterans, therapy options for PTSD, support groups for people rebuilding their lives. "The thing is," Keanu said, "you can't do this alone. Nobody can. The idea that we're supposed to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps without help is garbage. Everybody needs help sometimes. Accepting it isn't weakness. It's wisdom." Robert set down his burger, his eyes wet. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Keanu was quiet for a moment. He looked down at his coffee, then back up at Robert. There was something in his eyes, something painful and personal. "I had someone in my life," Keanu said slowly. "Someone very close to me. She struggled with addiction, Ended up on the streets for a while. I tried to help, did everything I could, but sometimes people aren't ready to be helped. Or the help comes too late. Or it's just not enough. He paused, swallowing hard. I lost her. And I carry that with me every day, wondering if I could have done more, done something different. So when I see someone who is ready for help, someone who's fighting to survive and just needs a hand up, I can't walk away. I won't walk away, Robert understood then. This wasn't about charity or publicity. This was personal. This was Keanu's way of honoring someone he'd lost, of trying to make meaning out of pain. I'm sorry, Robert said quietly, for your loss. Thank you, Keanu replied. But tonight isn't about my story. It's about yours. And about making sure your story doesn't end on that sidewalk. After they finished eating, Keanu pulled out his wallet. Robert expected him to pay for the meal, which was generous enough. But then Keanu pulled out a thick stack of bills and handed them to Robert. This is to get you started, Keanu said. New clothes for the interview, toiletries, whatever else you need. The housing program covers your room and basic needs, but you'll want some money in your pocket. Makes you feel more human having a little financial security. Robert stared at the money. There had to be at least $500 there, maybe more. I can't take this. Yes, you can, Keanu said. And you will. Consider it an investment. When you get back on your feet, when you're stable and working, pay it forward. Help someone else who's where you are now. That's all I ask. Robert took the money with shaking hands. He'd asked this man for $1. One single dollar for a cup of coffee, and now he was holding enough money to change his immediate future. He had a place to sleep tonight. He had a job interview lined up. He had hope for the first time in months. I don't know how to thank you, Robert said, his voice breaking. You thank me by showing up to that interview, Keanu said. You thank me by taking advantage of the counseling, by working on yourself, by not giving up. You thank me by proving that you're exactly who I think you are, someone worth investing in. Before they left the diner, Keanu did one more thing. He wrote his personal phone number on a napkin and handed it to Robert. Call me if you need anything, Keanu said. I mean it. If the housing doesn't work out, if you need help with the job, if you're struggling and need someone to talk to, call me. You're not alone in this anymore, Robert. You've got people in your corner now. Robert clutched the napkin like it was made of gold, because in a way it was. It was a lifeline. A connection to someone who actually cared whether he lived or died, whether he succeeded or failed. They walked out of the diner together, and Keanu called a car to take Robert to the housing program. As they waited, standing under the streetlights, Robert finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind all evening. Why didn't you just give me the dollar and walk away? Most people would have, Keanu smiled, a sad but genuine smile. Because you're not most people, Robert. You're a veteran who served your country. You're a father who loves his daughter. You're a human being who deserves dignity and respect. A dollar would have given you a warm drink, but it wouldn't have changed anything. I wanted to change something. The car pulled up. Before Robert got in, he did something he hadn't planned. He hugged Keanu, just grabbed him and held on. This stranger who'd shown him more kindness in a few hours than he'd experienced in months. Keanu hugged him back, tight and real. You're going to be okay, Keanu said softly. I believe in you. As Robert rode away in the car, heading toward his new temporary home, he looked back and saw Keanu still standing there under the streetlight, watching to make sure he got away safely. And Robert realized something important. He'd asked for $1. But what Keanu had given him was so much more. He'd given him back his humanity. He'd given him back hope. He'd given him back a future worth fighting for. Robert woke up the next morning in a real bed for the first time in 8 months. For a moment he forgot where he was. Then it all came rushing back. The sidewalk, Keanu, the conversation, the help. He sat up and looked around the small room. It wasn't much, just a bed, a dresser, and a small desk. But it had 4 walls, a door that locked, and a window with actual curtains. To Robert, it felt like a palace. His phone, the cheap one he'd managed to hold on to through everything, buzzed on the nightstand. He picked it up and saw dozens of notifications. Text messages from numbers he didn't recognize. Social media alerts. What was going on? He opened one of the messages. It was a link to a video. His stomach dropped as he clicked it. There he was, on the sidewalk with Keanu. Someone had recorded their entire conversation, or at least parts of it. The video had millions of views already. and it had only been posted last night. The comments were overwhelming. This is what a real human being looks like. Keanu is literally the best person in Hollywood. That veteran deserves so much better. Thank you, Keanu, for stopping. I'm crying watching this. We need more people like Keanu in the world. But there were other comments too, ones that made Robert's chest tight. Why don't homeless people just get jobs? He's probably going to spend it all on drugs. This is just a publicity stunt. Robert set the phone down, his hands shaking. His face was out there now. His story was public. What if his daughter saw this? What if she was embarrassed? What if his ex-wife used it against him somehow? There was a knock on his door. Robert opened it to find David, the counselor who ran the housing program. He was in his 50s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "Morning, Robert," David said. "Mind if I come in?" "Sure," Robert said, stepping aside. David sat in the desk chair while Robert perched on the edge of the bed. "I'm guessing you've seen the videos," David said. Robert nodded. "Everyone's going to know now. Everyone's going to see what I became." Or, David said carefully, everyone's going to see a man who survived something difficult and met someone willing to help. Perspective matters, Robert. It's all over the internet, Robert said. People are talking about me like they know me, like they know anything about my life. I know it feels invasive, David said, but there's something else you should know. Since those videos went viral, we've received over $50,000 in donations, just overnight. People want to help veterans like you. They're inspired by what they saw. Robert's eyes widened. $50,000? And climbing, David said. The phone's been ringing all morning. News stations want interviews. Organizations want to partner with us. What happened to you last night, Robert? It's shining a light on a problem a lot of people want to ignore. Veteran homelessness, PTSD. The lack of support for people who served their country. Robert didn't know how to feel about that. He was glad if something good came from his situation, but it also felt strange being a symbol of something, even if that something was important. You don't have to do any interviews if you don't want to, David assured him. That's entirely up to you. But I wanted you to know that good things are coming from this, real tangible good. Over the next few days, Robert focused on settling into the housing program. He met with counselors, attended group therapy sessions with other veterans, started working through his PTSD with a therapist who specialized in military trauma. It was hard work, facing all the things he'd been running from. But it was also necessary. He used the money Keanu had given him to buy new clothes, get a haircut, get cleaned up. When he looked in the mirror now, he could almost recognize himself again. Not quite the man he'd been before, but not the broken person on the street either. Someone in between, someone rebuilding. The job interview was on Monday, just like Keanu had promised. Robert was terrified. He put on his new khaki pants and button-up shirt, clothes that felt foreign after months of wearing the same dirty jacket and jeans. He looked at himself in the mirror and tried to see what a potential employer would see. Tom's property management office was in a modest building in downtown LA. Robert arrived 15 minutes early, his resume printed on fresh paper, his hands sweating despite the cool morning air. Tom turned out to be a big man with a friendly face and a firm handshake. "So you're the guy Keanu called me about," he said, waving Robert into his office. "Yes, sir," Robert replied, sitting down carefully. "He spoke highly of you," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "Told me about your military background, your maintenance experience. But more than that, he told me you're someone who's fighting to rebuild. That means something to me." The interview lasted an hour. Tom asked about Robert's experience, his skills, what he knew about building maintenance and repairs. But he also asked about Robert's situation, not in a judgmental way, but like he genuinely wanted to understand. "I'm not going to lie to you," Tom said. "This job is hard work. Early mornings, sometimes emergency calls in the middle of the night. Dealing with tenants who aren't always pleasant. But it pays decent, includes benefits, and if you prove yourself, there's room to grow. You think you can handle it?" "Yes, sir," Robert said without hesitation. "I can handle it. I need this chance and I won't let you down." Tom studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled. "Keanu's instincts are usually right about people. When can you start?" Robert almost cried right there in the office. "Whenever you need me. How about next Monday? That gives you a week to get everything sorted. We'll start you on the morning shift 7 to 3. Sound good?" "It sounds perfect," Robert managed to say. As he left the office, Robert felt lighter than he had in over a year. He had a real job with benefits and a paycheck and a future. He pulled out his phone and called the number Keanu had given him. It rang 3 times before Keanu answered. Robert? Keanu's voice was warm, pleased. How'd it go? I got the job, Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. I start next week. I knew you would, Keanu said. I'm proud of you, man. Really proud. They talked for a few minutes, Keanu asking about the housing program, about how Robert was adjusting, about the therapy. He checked in like a friend, not like a celebrity doing charity work. It meant everything to Robert. There's something else, Robert said hesitantly. I've been thinking about my daughter, about reaching out. But I don't know if I should. I don't know if she'd want to hear from me. What does your therapist say? Keanu asked. That I should wait until I'm more stable, until I have something positive to offer, not just apologies. That's probably smart, Keanu said. But Robert, don't wait too long. Life's short, and I think you'd be surprised at how much kids want their parents in their lives, even when things are complicated. After they hung up, Robert thought about that, about his daughter, about how much he missed her, about how scared he was that she'd reject him, but also how much he needed to try. The videos kept spreading. News outlets picked up the story. Robert started getting messages from people all over the country. Some were supportive. Some were curious. Some were other veterans sharing their own struggles, thanking him for bringing attention to the issue. One evening, David knocked on Robert's door again. There's someone here to see you, he said, looking mysterious. Robert followed him to the common area. And there, standing by the window, was his daughter. She looked so much older than he remembered. Taller. Her hair was longer. But it was definitely her. His heart stopped, Dad. Her voice was small, uncertain. Robert couldn't move. Couldn't speak. His daughter was here. Actually here. I saw the videos, she said, taking a tentative step forward. Mom didn't want me to come, but I had to. I had to see if you were okay. I'm okay, Robert managed to say. I'm getting better. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. For everything. For not being there. I thought you didn't want to see me, she said, and tears started running down her face. I thought you'd forgotten about me. Never, Robert said, closing the distance between them. Never, not for one single day. I love you so much. I didn't want you to see me like I was. I was ashamed. She hugged him then, tight and desperate, like she was afraid he'd disappear. Robert held his daughter and cried, really cried for the first time since he'd lost his home. I'm going to do better, he promised her. I have a job now. I'm getting help. I'm going to be the dad you deserve. You already are, she whispered. You just needed help. There's no shame in that. They sat together in the common area for hours, talking, catching up, carefully rebuilding the bridge between them. She told him about school, her friends, her life. He told her about the program, the therapy, his plans for the future. It wasn't perfect. There was still hurt there, still distance to cross. But it was a start, and it was all because one man had stopped on a sidewalk, had seen Robert as a human being worth helping, had refused to just walk away. That night, Robert called Keanu again. She came, he said simply. My daughter came to see me. That's amazing, Keanu said, and Robert could hear the smile in his voice. How'd it go? It was hard, but good, really good. And Keanu, thank you. None of this would have happened if you'd just given me that $1 and walked away. You changed my life. You gave me my daughter back. You did that yourself, Keanu said gently. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it. But Robert knew better. Sometimes all a person needs is for someone to see them, really see them and believe they're worth saving. Keanu had done that, and everything else had followed. 6 months passed like a dream Robert was afraid to wake up from. But this time the dream was good. This time the dream was real. The job at Tom's property management company turned out to be exactly what Robert needed. The work was physical and demanding, which helped. It kept him busy, kept his mind occupied. When he was fixing a broken pipe or repairing a fence, he wasn't thinking about the past. He was just focused on the task in front of him, on doing good work, on proving he was reliable. Tom was a fair boss. Tough when he needed to be, but kind too. He checked in on Robert regularly, not in a nosy way, but like he genuinely cared how things were going. When Robert had a bad day, when the PTSD flared up and he needed to step away for a few minutes, Tom understood. He never made Robert feel weak or broken. He just gave him space and trusted him to get back to work when he was ready. The other guys on the crew were good too. At first, some of them had recognized Robert from the viral videos. There were questions, awkward moments, but Robert learned to be honest about his story. About the military, the struggles, the streets, and instead of judging him, most of them respected him for it. A few even opened up about their own battles with depression, addiction, family problems. Robert realized everyone was fighting something. His fight had just been more visible. The housing program continued to be a safe haven. Robert had moved into his own small studio apartment now, still through the program but with more independence. It wasn't fancy, but it was his. He had a bed, a kitchen, a bathroom. He had walls that were his own, a door he could lock. After months on the street, it felt like a mansion. His relationship with his daughter was slowly healing too. She came to visit every other weekend now. Her mom wasn't thrilled about it, but she didn't stop it either. Maybe she could see that Robert was genuinely trying, genuinely changing, or maybe she just saw how much their daughter needed her father. They'd go out for pizza, or Robert would cook dinner in his tiny kitchen. They'd watch movies, talk about school. Sometimes just sit quietly together. Robert learned about her friends, her classes, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. She learned about his therapy, his job, his plans to maybe one day get a bigger place where she could have her own room. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of tension, old wounds that hadn't fully healed, times when she'd get angry about the months he'd been absent, the birthdays he'd missed, the fear she'd carried that he might be dead somewhere. Robert listened to it all, accepted it all. He couldn't change the past, but he could show up for the present. That's what his therapist kept telling him, and it was what he tried to do. Keanu checked in regularly too. Not every day, not in a smothering way. Just a text here and there, a phone call every few weeks. He wanted to know how the job was going, how things were with Robert's daughter, how the therapy was helping. Sometimes they'd meet for coffee. Just two guys talking about life. Keanu never made it weird. Never made Robert feel like a charity case. He treated him like a friend. One thing that surprised Robert was how much Keanu talked about his own struggles. Not for pity, not for attention, just sharing. He talked about losing people he loved, about grief, about the loneliness that could come even when you were surrounded by people. It reminded Robert that everyone had pain. Wealth and fame didn't protect you from that. You know what I've learned? Keanu said one day over coffee. Pain is universal, but so is resilience. So is the human capacity to rebuild. You're proof of that, Robert. As Robert got stronger, more stable, he started thinking about what Keanu had said that first night, about paying it forward, about helping someone else who was where Robert had been. He started volunteering at the housing program on his days off. Nothing big at first, just helping around the building, fixing things that needed repair. But then David asked if he'd be willing to talk to some of the newer residents, especially other veterans who were just coming off the street. Robert was nervous about that. What did he have to offer? He was still figuring things out himself. But David insisted. You've been where they are, he said. Recently enough that it's still real. That means something. It gives them hope. So Robert started talking to the new guys, sharing his story, listening to theirs. He told them about the street, about hitting rock bottom, about meeting Keanu and how one conversation had changed everything. But more importantly, he told them that change was possible, that they weren't broken beyond repair, that accepting help wasn't weakness. One guy in particular stuck with Robert. His name was James, and he was younger, maybe late 20s. He'd done a tour in Afghanistan, came home with a traumatic brain injury and PTSD so severe he couldn't hold down a job. His family had tried to help, but eventually they'd given up. He'd been on the street for 3 months when he came to the program. James reminded Robert of himself. That same look in his eyes, like he'd lost hope. Like he was just going through the motions of living without really being alive. Robert made it his mission to be there for James the way Keanu had been there for him. He invited James to lunch, helped him prepare for job interviews, just listened when James needed to talk. He shared the phone number of his therapist, encouraged James to stick with the counseling even when it was hard. Slowly, Robert watched James start to come back to life. The dead look in his eyes faded. He started smiling occasionally. He got a job at a warehouse, nothing glamorous, but it was steady work with benefits. He started rebuilding relationships with his family. One day, James pulled Robert aside. I don't think I'd be here without you, man, he said. You didn't give up on me even when I wanted to give up on myself. Robert felt his throat tighten. Someone did the same for me. I'm just passing it on. The housing program started getting more attention after the viral videos. More funding, more donations, more volunteers wanting to help. David expanded the program, added more beds, more services. He asked Robert to speak at a fundraiser, to share his story with potential donors. Robert was terrified. Speaking in front of a crowd, telling his story to strangers. But he agreed because he knew it could help others. If his story could inspire people to donate, to volunteer, to care about veterans struggling on the street, then it was worth it. The fundraiser was at a nice hotel in downtown LA. Robert wore his best clothes, which still weren't fancy, but they were clean and respectable. He stood backstage, his hands shaking, his heart pounding. Then he heard Keanu's voice. He turned and there he was, dressed in a simple suit, smiling. "What are you doing here?" Robert asked. "You think I'd miss this?" Keanu said, "You're doing something important tonight. I wanted to support you." They walked out on stage together. Robert told his story to the crowd of donors and supporters. He talked about the military, the PTSD, losing everything. He talked about that night on the sidewalk, about asking for $1 and receiving so much more. He talked about the program, the therapy, the job, reconnecting with his daughter. 6 months ago, I had nothing, Robert said, his voice steady despite his nerves. I was invisible. People walked past me like I didn't exist. But one man stopped. One man saw me as a human being worth helping. And that changed everything. He looked at Keanu, who was standing to the side of the stage.
Keanu gave me more than money that night.
He gave me dignity. He gave me hope. He gave me a reason to keep fighting. And now I get to pass that on to others. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Robert felt tears on his face, but he didn't care. This was important. This mattered. After the event, as people mingled and donated and pledged their support, Keanu pulled Robert aside. "I'm proud of you," Keanu said simply. "Look at how far you've come." "I couldn't have done it without you," Robert replied. "Yes, you could have," Keanu said firmly. "You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it. The strength was always yours, Robert." A few months later, Robert had saved enough money to move into his own apartment outside the program. Nothing fancy, just a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. But it was his, paid for with money he'd earned himself. His daughter helped him move in. They spent the day unpacking boxes, putting up furniture, making the place feel like home. As the sun set, they stood in the small living room, looking at what they'd accomplished. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said, leaning against his shoulder. "I'm proud of me too," Robert said, and he meant it, not in an arrogant way, but in a genuine recognition of how far he'd come, from a sidewalk to this, from homeless to home. He still volunteered at the housing program every week. He still met with James and some of the other guys he'd mentored. He still went to therapy, still worked on himself, still had hard days, but he also had good days. More good days than bad now. One evening, Robert was walking home from work when he saw a man sitting on the sidewalk. He was holding a sign asking for help. People were walking past him like he was invisible. Robert stopped. He reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. But instead of just handing it over, he sat down next to the man. "Hi," Robert said. "What's your name?" The man looked at him, surprised. "Carlos. Nice to meet you, Carlos." "I'm Robert." He handed him the money. "Get yourself something warm to eat. But before you go, I want to tell you something." Carlos nodded, waiting. 6 months ago, I was sitting right where you are, Robert said. "I know how hard this is. I know how invisible you feel. But you're not invisible to me. And you're not going to be in this position forever if you don't want to be. There are people who can help. Programs that work. I know because I've been through it." He pulled out a card for the housing program and handed it to Carlos. "Go see them. Tell them Robert sent you. They'll help you, but you have to be willing to accept it." "Can you do that?" Carlos stared at the card, then at Robert. "You were really homeless?" "For 8 months," Robert confirmed. "Slept in doorways, begged for change, the whole thing. And now I have a job, an apartment, my daughter back in my life. It's possible, Carlos. But you have to want it and you have to accept help when it's offered." They talked for a while, Robert sharing his story, Carlos sharing his. When they finally parted ways, Robert felt something he hadn't expected. He felt complete, like a circle had been closed. He'd asked for $1 and received a life. Now he was passing that forward, one person at a time. That night, Robert called Keanu one last time. I did it, Robert said. I paid it forward. Just like you asked. Tell me, Keanu said. So Robert told him about Carlos, about sitting on the sidewalk, about offering help instead of just money. When he finished, there was a long silence. You get it now, Keanu finally said, his voice warm. That's what it's all about. Not the money. Not the grand gestures. Just seeing people. Treating them like they matter. Because they do. Thank you, Robert said. For everything. For seeing me that night when I was invisible to everyone else. You were never invisible, Robert, Keanu replied. You just needed someone to remind you that you were visible. That you mattered. That's all any of us need sometimes. After they hung up, Robert stood by his window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Carlos was hopefully getting help. Somewhere out there, James was working his warehouse job and rebuilding his life. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling, fighting, trying to survive. And Robert made a promise to himself. He would never walk past someone on the street again without seeing them, without acknowledging their humanity. He would never forget what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be treated like he didn't matter, because everyone matters. Everyone has a story. Everyone deserves dignity and compassion and a chance to rebuild. It had all started with a request for $1, but what Robert received, what he now carried with him, was worth so much more. It was the knowledge that kindness could change lives, that one person stopping, one person caring, one person seeing another human being could set in motion a chain of events that transformed everything. Robert looked at the framed dollar bill on his wall, the one from that first night. The dollar he'd asked for but never actually needed because Keanu had given him something infinitely more valuable. He'd given him hope. He'd given him a second chance. He'd given him back his life. And now Robert would spend the rest of his days doing the same for others. One person at a time, one act of kindness at a time, proving that the best way to honor a gift is to give it away to someone else who needs it. The story that started on a cold sidewalk in Los Angeles had become so much more than anyone could have imagined. It had become a reminder of what humanity could be at its best, a reminder that we're all connected, all responsible for each other, all capable of making a difference if we just choose to stop and see the person in front of us. Robert had asked for $1. He received a life, and now he was paying it forward, keeping the circle going, making sure that kindness rippled out into the world in ways that would continue long after he was gone. That was his purpose now. That was his mission. And it had all started because one man refused to just walk away.